On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Reading area, I would like to welcome you to the candidates forum for District 1 of the United States House of Representatives. And for those of you who don't know, the 1st Congressional District is most of Northern California. So we are talking about the counties of Butte, Lassen, Modoc, Plumas, Shasta, Sierra, Siskiyou, and Tehama, and then parts of Glenn, Nevada, and Placer counties. So that will give you an idea of really the breadth of area that these folks will be taking a look at. The election will be held on March 3rd. Voter registration should be completed by tomorrow, which is February 19th. I don't know how many of you know that SB 207 was just passed and signed by the governor. Anybody heard of SB 207 besides me? Maybe it's not that important, but it is important as far as elections go, and it affects this election. And what happens with SB 207 is previously, if you wanted to vote for the primary and you were a no party preference person, which I must say, a quarter of the people in California have no party preference. You had to re-register according to a party if you wanted to vote a Republican ticket or some of the other tickets. So now you don't have to do that. All you have to do is say, I want a ballot so that I can do X. So this is a big step in the right direction, I think. We expect more people to vote because of it in the presidential primary. Vote by mail request has to be in by the February 25th. For Shasta County residents, you may vote early at the elections office Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. all the way through Election Day. From now through Election Day, pretty much. No. Yes. I want to remind you that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. The League encourages informed and active participation in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League does not endorse any candidate for a partisan office. So tonight we're going to be recording. We will have our procedures, our process go live on Facebook. We will record through the Shasta County Public Access channel, and that will be ready very soon, and you can go in and look at it or have your friends look at it. And KRCR is here, and we're giving Daisy a break. She's a brand new reporter, so we're going to give Daisy a break and help her out here. Let me introduce our candidates for tonight. The first person here on my left is Audrey Denney. The second person is Rob Lydon. The third person is Greg Cheadle. And the last person is Ken Swanson. Ken is a write-in candidate. Now you might want to know, why isn't Doug LaMalfa here? Doug LaMalfa let us know very early on that he would not be coming. And indeed, as I looked back over time, he often does not attend the earlier presentations, the earlier candidates forums. So we did offer him the option of sending, this is going to be our new way of dealing with people who can't make it, is since we allow a 3-minute opening comments, we would allow him to send 3-minute speech, and I would read it. But he didn't take advantage of that. And I don't know about Joseph LeTourneau. He let us know quite early that he could not come also. There was a problem there. So the order of speaking has been determined by lot. The statements will be timed. Our two timekeepers are up here, Patty and Nancy. And the timekeeper will hold up cards as appropriate. If you see a white card, you know it's 1 minute. If you see a yellow card, then you know you have 30 seconds. And when you see a red card, it means stop. There you go. All of our little cards. Each candidate will make an initial presentation of up to 3 minutes about their background, the areas of concern, and the reasons they are running for office. Questions will be directed to the candidates in rotating order so that the same candidate is not always the first responder, and candidates will have one minute to respond to each question. Our timekeepers will keep the candidates apprised of time. Each candidate will make a closing statement of up to 3 minutes. One of the reasons that we allow 3 minutes for the closing statement is that we don't have rebuttals in any way, so we like the candidates to be able to say, somebody did say something that I didn't quite agree with, and if we give them a little extra time, they can fit that in. As you came in, you were provided with 3x5 cards like this, if you wished, and a pencil, if you wished. And you write your questions on that card, and then some of the ladies raise your hand, some of the ladies will come and pick up your card. I have to tell you that we are not able to ask every single solitary question. We already have almost 100 questions back there, and you do not want to be here until midnight. So, what we're going to do is they're going to sort the questions, they give me the questions, I sort them a little bit. We try to have a look at the wide variety of issues that are facing our candidates and our legislatures. Any questions from you all? We're ready to go. Okay. So we're going to start with opening comments, and Audrey's going to go first. Now, I am going to ask you if you could sit.
Sit the whole time.
Sit the whole time. First of all, if you stand up, we won't be able to see your face because what little light we have is down here. And because they're filming, it's hard when you stand up and...
I'll move my water bottle so you can see my face.
That's it. Great. Thank you. So 3 minutes. Thank you. Audrey, would you... is it okay with each of you? I call you by your first name, please. Okay? Take it away.
All right, good evening, friends. I am so excited to be up here with you in Shasta County. And this will not be a surprise to anyone in this room, but our political system in Washington, D.C. is broken. Hyper-partisanship has gridlocked our government. Our representatives are responsive to their biggest corporate donors and not the people that they represent. And the lack of action and this gridlock has created apathy. Created an entire generation of young people who don't believe that their voice matters. But the good news is that stops today. Because the people in this room and the people in this district have the power to change the system. We have the power to make the system work better. We can elect at every single level of government true public servants that put you first. We can elect a representative that rejects corporate PAC money and only is responsive to the citizens in their district. And we, the people, have the power to heal the partisan divide in our country. We can decide, we can choose to look at our neighbors as our fellow Americans rather than as Republicans and Democrats. Folks, I am running to be your public servant. And I am running to represent every single person that lives in California's 1st Congressional District. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here tonight with these gentlemen, and I'm thrilled to dig into the issues and your questions and talk about how we can make our part of the world just a little bit better. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, good evening. I'm Rob Lydon. I'm a veterinarian, grew up in Chico, went to school, pretty much lived, worked, raised my children here. I have deep ties to this community, and watching as we've been misrepresented in Washington by hyper-partisanship. She used the word, I'm going to agree with it. Frankly, I don't care whether you drive on the left side of the road or the right. I drive a little more on the left. But when we have folks that are trying to pull the steering wheel so hard to the right that the folks on the left have to pull back the other way, we end up overcorrecting one way back and forth, and we end up with gridlock, deadlock, we end up off the road, and we don't get things done. And I want to focus specifically on what is it that we the people want to do, and how can we reach across the aisle and work with our brothers and sisters on the other side and say, can we solve these problems? I live my life by 3 main principles. Yes, we can. It might not look like we expect, but it's not about me. And that last is probably the biggest piece for me. It's frustrated me to watch the overspending that our government has and the lack of ability to collect the monies necessary to pay for what we need.
We have to balance the two. We have to cut our spending and we have to raise our income. We have to get rid of this debt. I'm watching as every man, woman, and child in this country is indebted by another $3,000 a year. In 30 years, our kids will not be able to pay their debts. And all the freedoms that we have, all the liberty that we said that we want to preserve for ourselves and our posterity will be thrown away. We have got to correct that debt problem.
Thank you. Greg?
You know, the world,
That's good.
okay. The world is watching you because the world is watching me. Throughout the United States, Europe, and the Middle East, I've made headlines. The latest video that I have on, from being on the Stephen Colbert Show has 1,399,735. The question then becomes, why are they watching? Why are they taking notice? It's because they finally have somebody who will stand up against injustice. Someone who is fed up with the lies that perpetuate injustice. You know, it's not because I have an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree and a master's degree and a doctorate degree. It's not because of that. It's not because I run 5 times in this district without taking money from special interests or corporations or from outside the district. It's because of my ferocity with respect to injustice. It was Joseph Goebbels who said, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent. For the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. What are some of the lies that are going out now? Vaccines are safe and effective. That's not true, because if you look at the number of stats that are out there, it shows that vaccines are not safe at all. If you look at the data shows that. The FDA has come out and said they're concerned about the cancer risk from vaccines because of the monkeys that they use. Another lie is the economy is doing great. The economy is doing great because there was an audit of the Fed that showed that $12 trillion went to banks nationally and internationally. And quantitative easing is still occurring to the point where the Fed is buying up $80 billion a month in securities. The other lie is that this climate stuff, that you have to be taxed like crazy, which is a lie, because the thing is, they want to take the money from you, the poor people, and give it to the filthy rich. I am not in the least bit interested in having a government become abusive, as Joseph Goebbels, an underling of Hitler, stated. The lies and the state, and the lies that the state is using to manipulate all of us have got to go. So send someone to DC who will see the lie and won't repeat the lie.
Thank you. Ken?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ken Swanson. I've lived up here in Reading since 1980, moved from Los Angeles, up the Torrance area. And I wanted to move up here because this is where you find actual friends and community. So if you've seen it, I probably had a part in building it. I also did 2.5 years at KQMS doing construction talk radio, which was one of the highest rated by TAPSCAN ratings live radio shows in the North State. I have family up here, and I have enjoyed. My wife is here with me. And, we have had our being here for God knows how long, and it's been fun. And when I did the radio show, I had a disaster awareness program that was incorporated in every broadcast that I did. And when I got off the radio, I started doing a national disaster awareness program. You can find that anywhere on the web. You can see my website at talkradiobuilder.com. And what I'd like, folks, is for you to send me to Congress, because I have a job to do. I need to go to Congress. I need to establish a bill. I need to get that bill going. I need to get out of there in 2 years and get out and run the program. This National Disaster Awareness Program has a jobs program in it. And that's what my friend George tells me. He says, you got to tell people that you got a jobs program. But folks, I'm tired. As a former president of the Shasta County Fire Safety Council, I'm tired of the disasters. I'm tired of the car fire. I'm tired of the campfire. I'm tired of the Mendocino complex, or all the disasters in Los Angeles, or the Bay Area, or the Delta fire. We need to establish a national disaster awareness program. We need to give every homeowner skin in the game, and that gives everybody a place to be able to communicate. It gives officials, everybody, a town hall meeting without paying a dime. Okay? This will do it, and it'll do it here in the United States, and it'll do it in any developed country in the world. That's why I need to go. I'm not a career politician, I'm a builder. And if you send me to Congress, we can get this thing going, and it will snowball because it'll all be hooked up with the internet and social and all of that. What I need to do, go there, the team is there, the infrastructure is there, go to Congress, get the consortium, get the quorum, get the bill, get it established, get out of there and run the program, watch this thing snowball, and it'll just go crazy. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, you're going to go first on the first question. And the first question is, do you agree with the Equal Rights Amendment? Why or why not? With the Equal Rights Amendment deadline removal. Sorry, I didn't see the bottom line. Do you agree with the Equal Rights Amendment deadline removal? Why or why not?
Equal rights deadline removal amendment. I will have to confess to ignorance of that.
Okay, not a problem. Greg?
Yeah, for me, it's not so much the deadline, but it's the fact that it's an equal rights amendment, and there are certain groups in this country who have never had their rights. Their rights are always violated, and those groups are not included. And so, at the very least, those groups will not get the rights they deserve. And so, it's not the deadline; it's the fact that we have a bill that ignores the historic refusal to allow certain groups to have rights.
Thank you. Ken?
Folks, when I look at people, when I see you out there, I see Americans. That's what I see. You've taken your time to come out here and do what you need to do. And when you go to Congress and you stand in party lines, you're going to get told the way to vote. Now, if those ways, if they go with God's rules, natural rules, and they don't infringe upon your rights, in fact, if it enhances your rights, I'm there for you.
Thank you. Audrey?
I absolutely wish that I had been in the U.S. House of Representatives this term so I could have voted on the bill to remove the deadline that was passed through the House 2 weeks ago to remove the deadline for states to authorize the Equal Rights Amendment so we can finally get a constitutional amendment that guarantees women equal rights as men. And I am so proud of people like Congresswoman Jackie Spear, who have been fighting for women's rights since the 1970s, fighting for the ERA to go through, and I cannot wait to be among their ranks to stand up for not only women, but all historically marginalized populations and every single person that lives in California's 1st District.
Thank you. Second question. Greg, you're going to be the first one to answer this question. Do you support a universal basic income for individuals?
You know, in a lot of respects I do, because the reality is, whether we have that universal payment or not, we are still kicking out at least that much money, if not more, per month, per person. When you look at the people who are homeless and the prison population, it would be better if we had a situation whereby those people could either work, and there are people who are unemployable, period. No matter what you do, those people are unemployable. I've seen them, they have missing limbs, diabetics, so forth and so on. I mean, chronic diabetes to the point where they have to have cured a pack and missing limbs, so forth and so on. So there are people who need that income. Now, those who are able-bodied and are able to work, that's a different story. But we have to address this in that we cannot have people homeless like we have here without any blanket to help them. So that basic income does have its merit.
Thank you. Ken?
Thank you. Folks, the GDP of the construction industry is about $631 billion a year. My program provides a jobs program in it where people can get a basic job in the construction industry and make, say, from $12 to $15 doing the most marginal tasks. And they can build up from there. They can be a licensed general contractor in no time at all. So we need to come up with new, creative, exciting ideas that gives people opportunities. Instead of working at just a regular job where they're just doing some menial task day in, day out, but something that will give them a future. And not only that, they can buy their own house, and they can work on their own house, put sweat equity into their house, sell their house, flip their house, or live in it and raise their family. But it gives them what they need to raise that family and have something as an American.
Thank you. Audrey?
So I don't, coming up. I don't believe in a universal basic income, which irks some of my most progressive friends. And for those of you who might not be familiar, the UBI would give every single American a certain basic income. The number that's been floated by folks like Andrew Yang is about $1,000 per month. And I just don't think that we've seen enough data on it yet to make sure that it will be successful and make sure that the dollars and cents pan out. There was a pilot program done in Stockton, and I think that we can learn something from the data there, but there's been no country in the world that has successfully implemented this nationwide. But it does bring up the interesting point of, as we're moving forward in the next 20 years, we don't know what kind of jobs we should be preparing young people for right now, because technology and mechanization is moving at such a quick rate. And so we do need to be having the conversations about what does work mean, how can people find value, and how do we make sure that nobody falls through the cracks.
Thank you. Robin?
Thank you. I too don't find that the UBI makes any sense. For two reasons. Number one, my basic principle is that if you can work, you need to be working. And I think that if you have the opportunity to be able to live without working, there are enough people who will take it. And we need to have incentive to get out and do what needs to be done to pay it forward. But second, I'm not sure how we're going to pay for it. And until we have good data that shows how we're going to do that, that really is an 800-pound gorilla in the room. And I just want to address that issue first.
Thank you. Can you get the next question first? It's kind of a follow-up actually to this question. Homelessness is a critical issue in our country, and particularly in California. Do you think the federal government has a role in addressing homelessness? And
Well, that would
what
make-
would that role be?
That would make for one heck of a public-private partnership, would it not? But seriously, people that are out on the street, they are there because of drug problems and because of pharmaceuticals and whatnot, and just letting this get crazy years ago. And this is the result of all of that. Do I have an answer for the homeless problem? No, I got an answer for a jobs problem. Now, maybe there's somebody in Congress or maybe somebody up here that has been given a gift from God that will address that issue. I have not. I have been given a gift from God to share with my country that has everything to do with the National Disaster Awareness Program and a jobs program. So maybe I can find somebody that would sponsor a bill and do something like that, and we could get that going. But I'm just about as clueless as you are.
Thank you. Audrey?
So this problem is one of the biggest problems facing the state of California right now. Across the state, we have 134,000 unhoused people, and this problem looks different in Butte County than it does in Shasta County, than it does all the way up in Alturas, right? And the federal government absolutely has a role in working with the state and local governments and service providers to address the complicated snarl that is mental health issues, adverse childhood experiences, post-traumatic stress, addiction issues, and lack of economic opportunity that are all tangled together in a snarl that lead people to being unhoused. The federal government does provide funding for local service providers, and it comes down through the County Coalition of Care. But that money comes with so many strings and so many checklists that oftentimes local service providers don't want anything to do with it, like the Jesus Center. So as your representative, I'm going to fight to streamline the regulations and make sure that the local service providers get rewarded for being innovative and outcomes-driven.
Thank you. Rob?
Thank you, that's a great question. It's tempting to flip out a real quick answer. Well, if you want stray cats, just start feeding them. They'll show up. And you want to get rid of them, stop feeding them. But we're not talking about cats, we're talking about people. We're talking about people who have had bad things happen in their lives and not been able to cope with them. They don't have the educational tools to understand that they have value as people. And I think that in many ways, the homelessness problem that we have nationwide, but really focused here in California, is really based on education. We have not started early teaching kids you have value. We haven't taught parents that they have value. And we need to work on our educational system so that we can fix the problem from the beginning. It will not happen overnight. It won't fix it today, but it will fix it for our grandchildren.
Thank you. Greg?
You know, part of the problem is the homeless have been stereotyped like crazy, you know, drugs, so forth and so on. A lot of these people, if you spend the time to talk with them, they have some fascinating stories. But more interesting to me is that when you look at the increase in homelessness, it coincides with the increase of multi-billionaires. So our federal government has the nerve to condemn the homeless, but does everything it can to make these billionaires even more billionaires. I mean, it's crazy. And so the government has a job to help us. We are the government, not these multi-billionaires. And so when government allows these multi-billionaires via subsidies, via loans, via these lucrative government contracts, it leads you and me astray. So the government has got to do this job of addressing us and helping us and letting the money come to us. I just said $16 trillion from the Fed and no accountability. Go out and get a loan. These guys just sit at the table and they got $16 trillion.
Thank you. Audrey, you're first on the next question. The United States is in the middle of an opioid crisis, an epidemic of use of substances. What role should the legislature take to address that? And what would your role be in that role in the legislature?
In 1 minute.
In 1 minute. Could you solve the world's problems,
Yes,
please?
yes, I can. So folks, when you look at a map that shows the density of opioid prescriptions, our whole corner of the world is a dark, dark red. This is something that we are feeling extremely close to our hearts up here. Last campaign, I had the opportunity to speak with the undersheriff of Modoc County, and he told me that of his beds that were full in his jail, 14 of them were folks that should be in treatment facilities and not in jail. Folks, we don't even have the beds in our part of the world to put people in treatment facilities, right? And so when we are looking at addiction as a crime, rather than as something, a disease that needs to be solved, we're looking at it wrong. And I bet every single one of you in this room knows somebody or has somebody in your family who's addicted to something. And until we invest at the federal level in rehab and treatment facilities, until we make sure that we secure up Medicare and Medi-Cal so those costs can get taken care of, I want to talk all night.
Thank you. Rob?
Thank you. Without understanding the nature of addiction, that most of the time what starts down that path is a sense of hopelessness. We are not going to address the issue. People don't decide to go out and become addicts. They feel depressed, hopeless, and they think maybe this might help, at least make it feel better for a while. We need to address the underlying problem, which is hopelessness. Yes, I agree absolutely that we need treatment. We need to get people out of that spiral. But we need to work to pay it forward so that our grandchildren don't have that problem. We need education that teaches people they have value and they have hope and they have a future.
Thank you. Greg?
You know, the opioid crisis mirrors the racism in this country. When blacks were targeted with crack cocaine, we weren't seen as people who had a little problem, we were seen as criminals. And now that whites have this opioid crisis, they need help, they need therapy, they need treatment. Why in the world was that not the case with crack? And so for me to sit up here and be all nice and, oh, no. You have got to address the problem that we have in this country, and that is racism. This racism is killing us as a people. We are so ununited. Whenever it happens to a white person, it's, we've got to save the world. When it happens to a black person or someone else of color, oh, let them die. Let's put them in jail. Look at all the prisons we're building right now. And this city wants to build even more jail space. So we have got to deal with the racism. With respect to the opioid crisis itself, granted I do have a soft heart, there does need to be some things happening, but we have to deal with the racism that's involved with this as well.
Thank you. Ken?
The opioid crisis. If you look at Revelation and you look at a word in there, it's named sorcery. The sorcery in the Hebrew language, or the Greek language, is pharmaceuticals. That's where we get that word from, sorcery. This is a very, very large problem, folks, and everybody has value. And to help these people out, my guess would be if we could put God back into our society and get the churches to help these people and actually create new and exciting venues and ideas for these people. People in the healthcare, that's their job, that's what they do. They see this every day. Let's take their advice. Let's find somebody that has good ideas and bring those forth. Let's not just hide behind politics when it comes to an issue like this. Let's get our communities going.
Thank you. Rob, you're going to be first on the next question. We already have a very complicated healthcare system. In 1 minute, tell me how you would cure those problems. No, I'm kidding. Do you have a couple things that you would change about the system that we have today? And what are they?
Yes, I would. As a veterinarian, healthcare is very near and dear to my heart. I think it's even more important to take care of people than it is to take care of critters. In fact, the motto of my clinic is that I take care of people by taking care of their critters. We have a system where we try to provide care for as many people as possible. And there are people who fall through the cracks. And if there was one change I would make, it would be to ask that we put benchmarks that we could look at every year and say, we are going to try to hit this benchmark, this many people covered, and this much cost. And we're going to look at it every year, and we're going to make adjustments. We're not going to throw out what we have. We're going to make changes so that we can improve things on a step-by-step incremental process. It's what I do at work. It's what I see happen in businesses that work well, in governmental institutions like the college that I'm one of the trustees for. We review what we do every year and ask, how can we make it better? That's really what we need to do, is set benchmarks.
Thank you. Greg?
It's funny, we want to chase this thing. We want to maintain the status quo. And in order to deal with healthcare the way it should be dealt with, is accept the fact that we need to address prevention. The United States is an anomaly throughout the world in that the way we eat is so unnatural. We go to a box, a can, or whatever else. And our diet is killing us. The majority of the cases with respect to health are self-induced. We're going to have a plague pretty soon of diabetes. That means obesity that leads to diabetes. We're going to have a ton of people like that. We cannot afford to take care of them. So if we spent money on prevention, we wouldn't have to worry about this healthcare crisis. What we have to do is change the way we are with respect to eating. The government allows us to eat animals with cancer because they can't screen those animals enough, so they go through with cancer, and we're surprised that we have cancer. We have to tax these industries, and we have to tax them.
Thank you. Ken?
Folks, every healthcare provider that I've ever talked to, they had an issue with insurance billing. Now, you put me in Congress, I'm going to seek out those congressmen and those people who know these things better than I do, get on their team and work to do something about it.
Thank you. Audrey?
So this became a real visceral issue for me on my last campaign. I got a football-sized tumor in my ovary and had to have emergency surgery And I was equally worried in that time that I had stage 4 ovarian cancer as the fact that I might go bankrupt. And in 2020, in the United States of America, the fact that 2/3 of the bankruptcy come from medical traumas is unacceptable, right? And almost every single person in this room is one disastrous health insurance health crisis away from bankruptcy, right? And so I believe the answer to this system is transitioning to a single payer system to make sure that everybody has high quality, affordable care. Folks, that's gonna take time to restructure 1/6 of the economy, but at the end of the day, I believe that that's where we need to go. I hope we get a question about rural healthcare too, because we have some unique challenges that we need to face up in this area about access and quality of care, but I'm done.
Okay. Greg, you're first on the next question. And this is kind of another medical question, but it's much, well, maybe it's smaller. Right now, the United States, all over the United States, we're concerned about coronavirus that came from China. Actually, many more people are dying of the flu than even get touched by coronavirus. But what is the role of our government in addressing the idea of something like coronavirus?
I don't trust the government. All of a sudden, overnight, we have this virus and people being quarantined. Giving the government the benefit of the doubt that there is this virus, the powers of the government are too strong and invasive. You know, someone could say, could quarantine all of us right now for I don't know how long. It's infinite. And so the power of the government scares me. This corona, what's going to be next? The Impala virus? I don't know. The government has too much power, too much control on things that are not as global or intense as the government portrays them to be. So they use that scare tactic in order to do whatever it wants to do. And I am not a fan of being quarantined or isolated.
Thank you. Ken?
Well, I think the CDC and the administration has done a pretty good job of taking care of this, and we're going to see what happens in the future. But it's just another disaster, folks, and disasters are going to come. Better look for them.
Thank you. Audrey?
Yeah, this has been a terrifying couple of months, right? And we had the Ebola outbreak in 2014, we have the coronavirus, and folks, the federal government's role in this situation is one of public safety, right? It's one of protecting our citizenry by whatever message and whatever meaning, whatever way necessary. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, has been consistently underfunded for a decade, consistently barred from doing really important research, and we need to make sure that they have access to all the funds that they need and have the permission to do the research that we need to keep us safe. Not only some of these natural occurring viruses and diseases that we're seeing, but folks, we're looking down the pipe at biological weapons, right? Sometime in the future, and we need to make sure that our government is ready to protect its citizenry from all types of these sorts of disasters and illnesses.
Thank you. Rob?
I have a classmate that came to vet school from human medicine because she wanted to study what we do in veterinary medicine and looking at herd health and apply it to people. And I have veterinary colleagues who work for Centers for Disease Control, and they apply those same principles. And while it may sound from the news that we've got this big scary thing going on, they've done a dang good job of helping identify and provide surveillance and issues for protection. This coronavirus is not as deadly as it is being made out to be. It is not the problem. The problem is ignorance and a culture of not trusting, quote, the government. I was under the impression it was government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that's what we need to do, is take care of ourselves by funding CDC.
Thank you. Ken, you're going to be first on the next question. And the next question, we're going to wander into foreign affairs a little bit here. What is your stance on the Israel-Palestine problem?
Well, if you ask me, you would probably get a lot of scholarly biblical advice that's going to go right over your head. And so we really shouldn't go there. Israel is God's chosen people, and they have always had that land. It's always been promised to them. And where it goes from here, that's not really my expertise, but what can you say? You do everything you can to make peace with your neighbors. If you can't make peace with your neighbors, then things start to escalate. They escalate from both sides. So what do you do to keep the peace? I think Mr. Trump has done a fine job in what he has done. And then even though Netanyahu's he's being brought up on charges, we're going to find out what that's all about. I would venture to say that's going to be a bunch of lies. But look, Israel is our friend. We have to support them in prayer and financial matters, and we'll be a better world for doing so.
Thank you. Audrey?
So I'm not going to solve the most contentious, heated geopolitical controversy of the last 100 years in a minute, but I will tell you what I know. And I will tell you that every single person wants a peaceful, lasting solution for that part of the world, right? And I personally believe that it's not the United States' job to make that solution. It is our job to help bring people to the table. As one of the longest standing, most powerful democracies in the world, it is our job to help support fledgling democracies around the world. I have empathy for both the Israelis and the Palestinians who are suffering extreme human rights violations every single day, right? And I believe that it starts with bringing people to the table to find this peaceful solution. And the actions of the Trump administration have done nothing to bring people to the table, and it has set us back decades in finding a peaceful solution.
Thank you. Rob?
It's my personal opinion that that problem will never actually fully be solved. That there are too many long-standing, this was mine, no, this was mine, no, this was mine. And until people are going to change their character when they say, you know, it's not mine, it's not about me, I'm going to give it to you, and treat each other with dignity and respect, that area is not going to have that. You've got two totally different worldviews based on books that people believe to their core. On one, it says death to the infidel. On the other one, it says this is our land, it was given to us by God. You're not going to change that mindset. And as Audrey said, I do not believe it is the job of America to bring peace. It's our job to bring people to the table, but it's also our job to help folks get educated. They can perhaps look at their books and say, you know, maybe we can find some common ground rather than extremism that divides us.
Thank you. Greg?
You know, the conflict there has been going on for millennia. And when you look at the history of the attempts to bring peace, no matter what the strategy was, it didn't work. It's a potential powder keg over there. And again, when you look at all the presidents and all the world leaders that tried to bring peace over there, no matter what strategy they tried to impose, it didn't work. So that's just one of those things where we just do our best. You know, try to bring them to the table. Good luck with that. If we get a solution, it will undoubtedly be temporary, and they'll be back, you know, feuding again.
Thank you. Audrey, you first. Continuing on the foreign affairs sort of approach, do you think NATO is still an important entity and deserves support from the United States?
Absolutely. One of the most terrifying effects of the Trump administration over the last 3 years is our diminishing power on the world stage, our losing the respect and the support of our allies, and our president and our administration cozying up to dictators and to human rights abusers around the world. The current administration's distaste for NATO is just the last in a long series of actions that he has taken to further distance us from our allies. And in this time of historic global challenges, where we're seeing massive refugee crises, more refugees than World War II, we're seeing this global climate disaster. We as America can't be leaning into this America First mentality. We have to be global leaders trying to work with all of our allies and people who don't agree with us to find solutions to these problems that will determine whether or not we have a livable world.
Thank you. Rob?
Thank you. A U.S. representative, according to the Constitution, has no jurisdiction over making treaties. That is the purview specifically of the Senate. So I don't want to speak to that because that's not within the jurisdiction that I'm seeking. But what I can say is that if we want to see those sorts of things addressed, we need to elect senators who will do the things that we want them to do. And what that looks like is not my job. However, what is within my purview is to deal with the refugees that she's talking about. And that means changing the way that we do things to allow folks to come into the country that want to be here and need some help. That means adjusting many of the things that are within the framework of the House of Representatives.
Thank you. Greg?
You know, when it comes to refugees, you know, we have to deal with home first. You know, refugees want to escape poverty, they want to escape violence. Go to Chicago, go to Cleveland, go to Baltimore, go to East Oakland. We have got to deal with here because we're hypocrites when we go out there. We want to clean up the whole world, but we don't want to do diddly squat for Chicago, for South Central LA, for Miami, for New York City. Clean up here first, and then we can talk about the rest of the world.
Thank you. Ken?
Well, personally, I'm not too crazy about NATO, and as the administration does its thing with NATO and the economy improves and keeps on improving, we're going to see what happens with NATO. I will agree with Greg. These are tough times, and America cannot do anything until we fix several holes in the bucket. When those holes in that bucket are fixed, then we can start addressing other people's problems. And quite frankly, my program, my jobs program, and my National Disaster Awareness program has everything to do with that.
Thank you. Rob, you're first on the next question. We're going to continue sort of on this tact. Do you support or oppose California's current sanctuary state status? Why or why not? Which may or may not have to do with the job that you're running for. Just saying.
Thank you. You stole my thunder. So, on a national level, we need to address our immigration policy, period. What I will say is there's no such thing as a Native American. Everyone here is an immigrant. If we trace genetics, you can find nobody actually arose here in this continent or in South America. Everyone is an immigrant of one sort or another, or a descendant of an immigrant. To try to say us four and no more makes no sense to me whatsoever. We are all people who either came here directly or are descended from folks who came here. And we managed to do pretty well for ourselves. And I think that we need to make some adjustments to our policies that allow folks who are here and working and not committing crimes to become citizens if they so desire. And those folks who want to come in here need to be screened in such a way that we make sure that we keep ourselves safe, but that we give opportunities to those folks who need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg?
Well, not all of us are immigrants. Some were forced over here by, you know, your history. With respect to sanctuary cities, a problem arises in that gives, interestingly enough, it gives those who are here, for lack of a better word, illegally, more rights than you do. There was a case in Southern California where, I hate to use a word, but time to go. He was arrested, then turned over to ICE. Then he had the nerve to sue, and he got $16,900 for that arrest. Now, for DUI actually. So for DUI, he got popped, and he got rewarded $16,000. If I go out and I get popped for DUI, I don't drink, but if I did get popped, or you got popped for DUI, you're in a lot of trouble. And so that, yes. But the other thing too is human trafficking. It's a cover for it, and that concerns me.
Thank you. Ken?
Folks, I grew up in Los Angeles in Torrance, and I left there in 1980 because, as I said, I wanted to move up to community, friends, people you can depend on and whom you can give your trust to and share that, reciprocate that. One of the reasons I left Los Angeles is I saw it back then. I saw that hole in the bucket. And I knew if you don't get this hole in this bucket fixed, we're going to be in a lot of trouble, especially in California. I have an uncle who lives in Benson, Arizona. That's right next to the border, Douglas, Tombstone, and Bisbee and the border. He ran for his life because he was doing welding tutorials and teachings south of the border. And he says to me, he says, Ken, Trump can't build that wall fast enough for me.
Thank you. Audrey?
So the question was about sanctuary, right? And sanctuary is an issue of local and state control, and we have to think about and talk about how our local and state governments decide to implement laws that are pursuant to their community's priorities. And I absolutely support the local control of local and state governments to pursue what they believe is right for their communities in conjunction with the citizenry and their local law enforcement and public safety officials. But when we talk about immigration reform from a federal level, folks, that's where I get to be involved, right? Our congressman has had 8 years at this job, and he has made no meaningful progress on the issue. And there are simple steps to be made, right? Just this year, HR 5038 was passed, which is a farm worker agricultural visa reform bill, wildly bipartisan, that Senator McConnell will not let come to the Senate floor, right? So there are small steps we can take on a way to making sure that we're also protecting our dreamers and making sure that we're creating a pathway of citizenship to the people who've been in our communities safely and legally for so long.
Thank you.
I must be done talking.
Don't let them scare you.
How do you answer it?
They are. Let's just look at them. They're smilingly tough. Smilingly tough. Greg, you're first on the next question. I'm going to change it up a little bit. Maybe we will change it up a little bit. Should individuals who are living here not under a legal status be provided or denied medical care, and what are your reasons for that?
As a government with compassion, yes. The problem is there's a tendency for it to be abused. One of the abuses is when they come over and have babies here. And interestingly enough, the 14th Amendment is what is used, anchor babies is used, but the 14th Amendment had nothing to do with the way it's being abused now. The 14th Amendment was with respect to slaves. It had nothing to do with people coming over here illegally. So the Supreme Court or somebody has to fix that, because it's a big fat lie to anchor that aspect of immigration with the 14th Amendment. Yes, we should give people medical care, but again, it should not be abused, and there should be things in place, and there are things in place where these people have access to clinics that are available.
Thank you. Ken?
The balance is the key to life, folks, and there has to be a give and a take in all of this thing. Now, just for fun, since I'm from Los Angeles being a monster city, there's that in the whole Bay Area, I did a little bit of math. I figured, let's see, how many illegals would there be in Los Angeles? How many illegals would there be in San Francisco Bay Area, and then I times those amount of illegals, because their stats are there, by one flush of a toilet. Okay, and the water usage of somebody who maybe should not be here, you would not believe the amount of money goes down the toilet for people using those services. And we're not even talking about towels they use, the soap they use, or anything else that has to do with just a bathroom, a public bathroom. You're talking about a serious amount of money, folks, that needs to be addressed and taken care of, because that's the hole in the bucket I'm talking about.
Thank you. Audrey?
Well, we're going to start by not calling an entire segment of the population illegals, which is dehumanizing for people who have the same inherent humanity as us. And we're instead going to call them something like undocumented immigrants, right? That's where we're going to start. And then we're going to call the argument bullshit that they are using more than they are taking. Undocumented workers spend $13 billion annually into Social Security taxes. Guess how much they take back out? $1 billion. Folks, they are paying more than their fair share. They are not accessing services because they are afraid when they go to said clinics they are going to get deported by ICE. They are living in horrific conditions, and they're contributing to the economies of our communities in such a level we can't even describe. We cannot pick enough crops in the Central Valley because we have a shortage of agricultural labor. We have to treat every human like a human, because as soon as we go down the slippery slope of dehumanizing people, we go back to World War II.
Thank you. Rob?
As a veterinarian, I watch statistics. And one of the statistics I pay attention to are rabies cases. The last 2 rabies cases in California were 4 years ago and 8 years ago. Both of them were undocumented men working in the state here, one in Trinity County, one in Tehama County. Both of them died from rabies because they were afraid to go seek medical care. That's not acceptable. Not on my watch. That's not acceptable.
Thank you. Ken, you're going to be first on the next question. We're going to continue the immigration discussion just for a moment. Do you think the federal government should repatriate Hmong non-citizens back to Laos? And please explain why.
That's an issue that I can't address. That's not my forte. There are people out there that know more about it than I do, and I'll let them take care of that issue, and I will vote according to the people.
Thank you. Audrey?
No. The 3 states that have large Hmong populations are California, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And both in Butte County and up in Siskiyou County, we have large populations of Hmong farm worker communities that are trying to eke out a decent living in really, really hard circumstances. We as a country, we as communities, need to do a better job integrating them into our society, making sure that they are paying taxes and receiving the benefits that they should from taxes, and making sure that they're provided the safety and security of all our citizens and all of our folks living here.
Thank you. Rob?
Repatriate. Repatriate. It sounds like forcing somebody back where they didn't want to be. That's not appropriate. Now, if they committed a crime, I don't care who they happens to be, you need to stand trial for your crime where you committed it. And I certainly don't want to provide a sanctuary to people who've committed crimes elsewhere. But I don't believe we have Hmong people who are waiting and hiding from crimes they committed at home. These are people like you and me who just want to make a living. Repatriating them, they're already here. This is their homeland. This is where they want to be.
Thank you. Greg?
Well, you know, it's interesting that when you talk about immigration, you can hear the racist tone when people say that we need them to do our crops. That's a form of slavery. That's what they said about us. And so it's okay, it's not okay to call them illegal, but it's okay to make them slaves. That's one thing I want to point out. With respect to the Hmong, I'd be a charlatan if I started saying something because I don't know the numbers. I don't know how many they are. I don't know how long they've been here. I don't know how they got here. I don't know any of that stuff. So rather than be a charlatan, I will say I will look into it and answer from that point on.
Thank you. Audrey, you have the next question first. Kind of a switch. What can we do to end gun violence without affecting the Second Amendment?
Great question, and I like to start my answer to this question with full transparency about my background. Right, I grew up on a family farm. I grew up in a family that safely and responsibly used firearms, and there was one fall that we had to get a depredation permit to harvest 80 wild boar who were destroying the vineyard. And I ate more carnitas that fall than ever before in my life. So I fully respect hunters, farmers, ranchers, and sports enthusiasts, the need to have their firearms. But I'm also sick and tired of kids having to do drills where they have to hop under their desks. And I'm sick and tired of kids looking around their schools and seeing where the hiding places are. And there is common sense gun reform legislation like H.R. 8 that was passed the House this year, sponsored by Mike Thompson, that will not go to the Senate floor because of Mitch McConnell. And we need to make sure we get universal background checks, that we ban bump stocks and binary triggers, and that we are working toward that we're working towards making sure that Republicans and Democrats can come around this common sense legislation that 90% of folks, even gun owners, believe in.
Thank you. Rob?
The Second Amendment is the law of the land. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the preservation of the free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms should not be infringed. The Supreme Court has ruled rather emphatically that well-regulated is a big part of it. And that means that we need to have some form of training for every man, woman, and child who wants to bear a firearm. If you look at statistics, people bearing CCWs compared to people who don't, it's the people who don't have them that are perpetrating these problems. We need to get those CCWs mandatory for anyone who wants to have a gun, period.
Thank you. Greg?
Here we go again. America's showing its racism. When there's a school shooting and all these white kids are killed, oh my goodness, it's a shame. We need to do something. When black kids are killed in Chicago every blasted day, and there's no outcry about it whatsoever. It's okay, let them die. Go to Baltimore, go to all these cities, and there is no outrage about guns. None. But when some little white kid gets killed, all of a sudden, it's a pity party. To answer your question, there is nothing that government can do to change the heart of these people who are bound to kill no matter what. You can take their guns away, they'll find them back. You can take anything away from them, and they will find a way to kill. So that's a matter of the heart. It's not a matter of any blasted government regulation. We are in a sick society, and when this moral slide that has taken us down, and the heart is the issue. It's not the gun, it's the heart.
Thank you. Ken?
That sounds like a question for our new sheriff. Now, my National Disaster Awareness Program is a town hall. It's a town hall. If I get 500 radio stations across the United States to do this National Disaster Awareness Program, there is a town hall for everybody concerned to call in and talk about these issues live and streaming. You imagine what that would look like in a network across the United States where everybody is talking about an issue community to community instead of politician to politician? I stand on the Constitution.
Thank you. Next question, Rob, you will go first. Do you accept that climate change is made worse by human activity? And if so, what can we do about it?
Fabulous question. From a scientific standpoint, we recognize that there is a carbon cycle and that there are changes that occur on planet Earth related to heat and cool from the sun cycles, and changes in the way that carbon finds its way into the atmosphere, into the oceans, and then is sequestered. We are definitely accelerating the rate of change, and we are creating some issues that will have long-term impact. In order to address this, we really need to focus on sustainable energy. And in my mind, specifically, at least in this state, the best approach for that is to increase the amount of solar capacity that we have so that we can rely on that rather than on carbon-based.
Thank you. Greg?
In my opening, I alluded to a lie about climate change and trying to prevent it. The reality is the climate change gimmicks do nothing more than rob from the poor and give to the rich. Let me give an example. One, we have 90,000 container ships in the world. If we had 15 of the largest ones, they would emit more emissions than the 740 plus million vehicles in the world. But yet and still, they want to nail me for driving my SUV. They want to nail you for your lawnmower. They want to keep you from driving your business truck. So the issue is, it's the rich exploiting the heck out of the poor, and that's what we have to look at. For each gallon of fuel that these ships use, they spew out 2,000 times more sulfur oxide than the diesels do. But yet and still, we're knocking out these truck drivers, everybody else who use diesel fuel engines. And so we have to nail the rich because the rich are soaking us.
Thank you. Ken?
You talk about climate change. How many of you people lived here for 30 years like me? Huh? A lot of you guys? Have you noticed a difference in the weather over these last decade or so? A little strange, isn't it? Well, how about the carbon emissions that are coming out of the forest in the decaying dead wood of the car fire, or the campfire, or the Mendocino complex, or any of the other fires that happen throughout the state? There's quite a bit of emissions coming off of that. And not to mention our good old federal government spraying aluminum into the air every day, all right? So there's some things that need to change, and number one, we need to stop that. That's a big problem. And I would say, study up on that.
Thank you. Audrey?
Not only is human-induced climate change real, it is already here and we are already living through the effects of it. Folks, the IPCC gave us 12 years to drastically change our actions as humans, or we will have not a livable place to live. With the car fire and the campfire in 2018, they emitted 45 million metric tons of CO2 into the air. That is 9 times the amount of carbon we were able to reduce our emissions by that same year in the state of California, even with our aggressive protocols. And we lost 93 lives, right? Not only is our part of the world the face of the climate crisis, if we elect the right person, we can become the face of the solution. We're talking about getting our forests into a state of ecological health so they're not emitting carbon, but they're sequestering carbon into the soil. We're talking about ag policy that trains and incentivizes farmers to sequester carbon, which is the cheapest way that we can mitigate climate change. And we're talking about a lot of other things when you ask another climate change question.
Thank you. Rob?
You already?
Yeah.
Oh, did you already do that one? You did. We're moving to Greg. Taxes. Do you believe that tax reform over the past 3 years has been beneficial to residents of your far northern California potential district?
Absolutely not. You know, again, as I stated earlier by the quote from Goebbels, these lies, you know, people bought the lie about this tax reform. Talk to truckers. Talk to people who work hard. Talk to the average person. This tax reform bill did nothing more than screw them at the benefit of, again, the filthy rich. They made out like bandits. And so, no, I mean, the tax reform has done far more harm to people like us any day. There's only one person that I know of that probably did well, who owns something large and is a billionaire in this district. But otherwise, all of us have gotten hosed by that tax reform bill.
Thank you, Ken.
Remember me over here, the write-in candidate? I'm that regular guy he's talking about. I did great. In fact, when I did my radio show, I was knocking down 6 digits. But that was then and this is now. Things have changed. Everybody I talked to is loving their 401ks. So, no problem with it, folks.
Thank you, Audrey.
6 digits, damn. As an educator with a master's degree, I've never made over 65K. I gotta get his job. Folks, 83% of the corporate tax giveaway went to the richest among us and went to corporations. And that's when our congressman voted yes on that bill in December of 17. That was the reason I initially jumped into this race, because I knew that it was gonna hurt me, I knew that it was gonna hurt you, I knew that it was gonna hurt my parents, and I think it sucks. So yes, they promised us economic growth. They promised us 6% economic growth. We've seen 2.9 in the last 2 quarters of 2019. We also have seen corporate stock buybacks. We've seen CEO bonuses, right? We absolutely need to repeal the corporate tax giveaway, and we need to give meaningful tax cuts to real middle Americans who make 5 digits. And we need to reinstate the state and local deductions for us Californians, absolutely.
Rob.
This isn't going to be popular with anybody, but it's true. While I agree with Audrey that we need to repeal that, because we need to pay taxes at the highest level, we cannot afford to give more tax breaks to ourselves. What we're doing is putting ourselves in debt, and we're making our children and our grandchildren pay for it. We need to live within our means. We need to balance our budget, and that means that we're going to have to all tighten our belts and pay a little more in taxes. That's not going to be popular, but that's the reality. But at the same time, we cannot expect that taxes are going to fix the problem. That's only going to make it half the battle. The other half of the battle is we have to start looking where we can cut our funding, where we can cut our spending, and start making ends meet.
Thank you. Ken, you're first on the next question, which is, what should the federal government do to help provide an equitable, quality public education for children, including pre-kindergarten through grade 12?
That's a simple one, folks. Bring God back into the fray.
Thank you. Audrey?
Faith has no place in public schools. Besides that, the United States is ranked 8th globally in education, and this is ridiculous. I've worked in education my entire career, and equity in education and investments in career tech education and social services within our education system are 3 of my most important priorities. Folks, in Modoc County, folks who live in the school district, only about 2.9% of those folks have access to the high-speed internet. So kids sit in the school parking lot to do their homework after school. Do you think kids who go to Modoc High School have the same economic opportunity later in life as kids who go here? Kids who go to Chico High? Kids who go to Palo Alto High? No. We have inequity and injustice in our education system, so why don't we send an educator back there with some ideas on how to fix it, which I could talk about if I had more than a minute.
Thank you. I've been taking a beating. I just want you guys to know. I have been taking a beating. Rob.
It's equal opportunity beating.
Yeah, it is.
Education is probably the only place that I would recommend deficit spending, because we need to make sure that every child, and every man, woman, and child in our country can read, can write, and can take care of themselves and make good, reasonable decisions. The education system in America has lived on its laurels for too long. We need to start looking, as I said we need to do with healthcare, we need to set benchmarks, and we need to evaluate them, and we need to improve the system every year. Not by scrapping things, but by looking at it and see how can we make it better. We're Americans, that's what we do. My approach to things is yes, we can. It may not look like we expect, and that's okay, because it's not about me. I need to find out what people here need. And high-speed internet is one of the things that will make a big difference. That is true. But funding, that's really where the rubber meets the road.
Thank you. Greg?
You know, I was invited to come to Chicago and Gary, Indiana to look at schools. Needless to say, I was not favorably impressed. What happens with school funding, it's the funding on the lower level, not the federal level, that's the issue. When you look at white school districts versus black school districts or districts that have color to them, the way those districts are cut, it leads to the segregation that we've had historically. So Brown versus Board of Education was part of the problem in that now we have these school districts outlined just like we had segregation back at, you know, prior to the 60s. And so the issue then becomes that on the local level, those parents, you're contrasting a wealthy parent versus a poor parent. And that's where the funding issue really is. It's not on the federal level.
Thank you. Audrey, you're first on the next question. We're going to continue with education for a minute. Should public colleges and universities be tuition-free?
Here's another one that my most progressive friends get mad at me for. I don't believe that they should be free. That said, we absolutely have to deal with, and I don't believe that because I believe eventually it will decrease opportunity for students when we don't actually have the funding to keep those institutions going. I absolutely am for 2 free years of community college at our 110 community colleges here in the state of California. There's 114, thank you, my board of trustees from Shasta College right here, keeping me honest. Like we do at Butte College in the county where I live, the Butte College Promise allows folks from the county 2 free years, and that gives them often a great jump start. But we absolutely have to address the $1.5 trillion student loan backlog, and we need to make sure that folks coming up in the generation behind me have the same opportunity that the generation of most of the people in this room did, which is getting a degree without going into debt. And I believe we also need to really focus on career and technical education and change the way we think about work as a society.
Thank you. Rob?
She stole my thunder.
Best friends.
Trying to imagine what our future will look like and what our future workforce looks like is probably the greatest challenge for post-secondary educators. And to be able to equip people to have full and balanced lives on the one hand, and yet be able to have something that is marketable skill and which is useful for contributing to the people taking care of themselves is absolutely key. And I believe that as a society, when we were just a small population, we could get away with every man is an island. But nowadays, we cannot do that. People are connected to each other, and we have to think, how do we take care of 300+ million people in this country? And part of it is through career technical education. I really, really strongly believe in that.
Thank you. Greg?
Should it be free? No. The $1.5 trillion for the student loan debacle is responsible for the increase in tuition, ironically. So government always has this knack of solving a problem by creating a greater problem. When we have students who can just get whatever amount of money they need, it does nothing to decrease or instill within the school itself the burden of spending within its means. And if you talk about free education, you're going to lead to the McDonaldization of education. That coupled with the fact that we're leaning toward this high-tech society where schools probably won't even be necessary pretty soon. You just go to a room and have a hologram of a professor saying something. So, no, it shouldn't be free.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, I would agree with Greg there. Remember back in the days where when you worked for something, you appreciated it even more so, and then you could share it with others?
Well,
how are you supposed to give away something free that somebody doesn't really want? They've got to want for it, they got to work for it. We got to provide new, innovative, exciting ideas for people. What about people in education? What about people who are silent right now in the education field who have answers for this? Okay, those people need to be brought out. They need to be given a platform where they can speak and we can start answering some of these questions.
Thank you. Rob, you're first on the next question. The current administration is considering changes to Medicaid that would result in less support for rural areas, and we are a rural area, and possible cuts to rural hospitals. Can you speak to that issue?
That's probably the dumbest idea that I've heard all night.
Okay. Great. Feel free to comment on that. Greg?
Oh, I thought he was...
No, I think he stopped, actually.
I was waiting for more.
No, that's it.
This is classic of the filthy rich soaking the poor. When you look at this country from its founding, it was the filthy rich exploiting the poor every way they could. This is another example. You know, to cut funding for people in need, poor people. They're not going to cut funding at these larger Cedars-Sinai down in LA, where all the movie stars go. They're not going to cut funding there, but they want to cut it here because these people are so blasted greedy. They want every single penny they can get, and they will exploit the poor to no end to get it. So no. We need Medicare, we need all that stuff because we paid into it, we pay our taxes, and blast it, we deserve health care.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, it goes back to what you work for, you earned. And you have that right. If you paid into it, then you should expect to receive that benefit when you get to the point where you need it.
So not only the administration, but also leadership in the House is consistently making our health insurance more expensive while it covers less because they are consistently undermining the insurance markets. Our Congressman Doug LaMalfa has recently voted against a bill that would have protected people with pre-existing conditions, against a bill that would have reduced prescription drug prices. In the past, he has voted for bills that would restrict our access, make it harder to get coverage, and make it harder for rural hospitals to get the reimbursements that they need. How we keep rural hospital opens? We do that by making sure everybody's covered. So when you go to the hospital actually gets reimbursed. Almost our entire 11-county district, which is the size of the state of South Carolina, is a medically underserved area. And we need to be shoring up the funding for programs like the National Health Service Corps, which actually sends doctors and nurses into our areas and pays back their student loan debt. We used to have 3 GPs in Susanville under that program. We now have 1, and that's the only GP in Susanville.
Thank you. Greg, you're first on the next question, which is, working cooperatively with members across the aisle is crucial to passing legislation, good legislation. How can you accomplish this?
I finally have an easy question. That's easy for me because as an independent, they will come to me. I don't have to go to them. I don't have to work. I don't have to stretch across either aisle. They will need my vote. I will listen to both sides. They will come to me.
Thank you. Ken?
So imagine Ken Swanson standing in Congress with a national disaster awareness program with a jobs program in it that has the potential of employing millions of Americans in a bipartisan program. Do you think they're going to turn that down? How about President Trump's Council for the American Worker? How about the workforce strategy? Do you know what the cohesive strategy is with FEMA? Okay, these are all issues that have to be met. I would love to go meet Ben Carson. I would love to work with housing and housing and urban development. My feet hit the ground in Washington, D.C. I will be running for these people. I'd love to meet Candace Owens. You talk about a wonderful person. I would love to talk to people that have that kind of insight. Dan Bongino, I'd like to meet that guy. Talk about clarity and knowing what's going on. Meet those people and get some jobs done, get a national disaster awareness program going, put people back to work in this country, and start doing something instead of talking about it.
Audrey, thank you. Audrey.
Anybody who says this is going to be easy either is lying or has their head in the sand. Folks, my dear friend, Congressman Mike Thompson, told me when he went back to DC, even less than 10 years ago, it wasn't as contentious, and he could have friends that were Republicans, and he could take their wives out to dinner together, and now he can't sit in a room or sit in a bar with a Republican friend without getting in trouble for it. We have to completely change the culture by electing a new generation of leadership who is over the party system and wants to move into a post-partisan era, who aren't beholden to parties or special interests. And it's going to take time. It's an entire culture shift, and it's going to take time to get well-established folks, hyper-partisan folks like Congressman LaMalfa out of office and elect people who want to represent every single person like me.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, I was that guy in the class that couldn't stay in their seat. I was constantly moving, sitting next to people. In the first week that I was in vet school, I knew all 124 of us by name, knew a bit of history about each one of us, and I could find common ground with just about anybody. I think all of us are people who want to do the right thing. We just have slightly different ways of seeing it. And I think that if we can sit down and not let somebody give us grief because I want to go out to dinner with somebody in their lives, I don't think that's appropriate for me to bow to that, and I'm not going to. I have friends who are extreme on either end of the political spectrum, folks in the middle, people who are so extreme they don't even want to be involved in politics. And I can talk politics, I can talk religion, because it's not about me. It's not about me, it's about ideas. It's about let's work together and come up with a solution.
Thank you. Ken, you're first on the next question, which is, what are the top 3 priorities you would like to accomplish after taking office?
Well, folks, you've heard it. I'm running because I didn't get anything in the last 12 years from any of my people. Mr. LaMalfa walked through the campfire down there with President Trump, and I contacted them the day before and said, I will have my cell phone with me. And when President Trump turns around and says, Doug, how are we going to mitigate this or stop this from happening in the future? That's your cue to call me up or tell President Trump about this guy in Reading who thinks he has a national disaster awareness program. Well, guess what, folks? He didn't do it. Okay? I've been working with him over 8-10 years, and he's known all about me. Or Mr. Dawley. Mr. Dawley said, what we need to do is get a House resolution for you. He never did it. Now, the only way for me to do this is to go from the top and work my way down. Go to Congress, get this done in a shotgun blast, get it all to America, get like 500 radio stations doing this, and you want to see something snowball, it happens here, it'll happen in any developed country in the world.
Thank you. Audrey?
Top 3, forest health and fire prevention, rural health care, and investments in education. And I'm thinking specifically, practically, what can I do as a first-term freshman congresswoman from California's 1st District? I will have about this much political power and influence, right? So by building coalitions, by working with others, I will try to strengthen existing pieces of legislation to make sure they benefit the North State. The very first one is conservation stewardship agreements, which are in the 2018 Farm Bill. We've got to work to make sure that what is in there already gets implemented in our local area. This is a method that brings all of the stakeholders together to invest in our forests and to get them into a state of ecological soundness. It's the state government, the federal government, the local governments, our Native American tribes, environmentalists, the private industry, and it's the actual mechanism which we can speed up the pace and the scale of the forest restoration. Second thing I think I can actually get done in 2 years is making sure that we're funding the National Health Service Corps so we can get doctors and nurses into our rural area.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, as she said, you don't have a lot of influence when you first begin, but you got to begin somewhere. And the 3 priorities that I have are education, addressing our debt, and eliminating this culture of disrespect and dishonor. We can go back to the days when it was appropriate to say my esteemed colleague from so-and-so and actually mean it and not have that be an insult. In order to get anything done, you have to work together and you have to find a common ground. And that's the thing that I think that I bring to the table, is that I can find common ground with just about anyone and say, let's work together and start with something. Let's move the needle.
Thank you. Greg?
For me, a lot of it centers around the economy. Right now, I would definitely attack, why are we not enforcing the anti-monopoly laws? Because what happens is that with these corporate raids, these corporations and hedge funds, they will go in, take a corporation to the cleaners, and have unemployed people. So we need to look at the anti-monopoly laws and enforce those. Voting rights is another issue. It's unconstitutional for states to disallow those with a felony not to vote. And again, it goes historically, you go back and you look at the rich taking power from the poor. And one of the ways that's done is through saying that felons can't vote. The other thing is to deal with this perpetual mass incarceration. We imprison nearly 2 million people. We create laws to imprison them for the prison industrial complex. So we need to address these people when they get out so they won't go back into incarceration.
Thank you. Audrey, you're first on the next question. Who is your hero and why?
That's a sweet question. Man, so my hero is actually my best friend, who is the executive director of the human rights organization that I'm on the board of in the Northern Triangle of Central America. And this man I've known for my entire adult life, and he's the person that really instilled in me the fact that every single person is inherently equal in worth and rights and dignity. And that doesn't matter where you live, that doesn't matter the color of your skin, who you love, where you were born, what language you speak, how much money you have. We're all the same, right? From my faith perspective, we're all the same because we're all children of God, and from a human rights perspective, it's you have value because you are inherently human. And he taught me that, and for that he's my hero.
Thank you. Rob?
I have a hard time thinking in terms of heroes, because as soon as you think of heroes, you have to think of villains. You have to think of stratifying people. My hero is the person sitting next to me that thinks and that has an idea and that brings it forward. It's the person who puts their hand up in the class that asks the awkward question that the rest of us wanted to ask, but we're a little too afraid. That's my hero. My hero is the person who treats everyone with dignity and respect, who remembers that we all have value, who's willing to say, you know, I don't have to get it my way. My hero is the person who thinks, what's going to happen for my neighbor's great-grandchildren? That's my hero.
Thank you. Greg?
I don't have a hero necessarily, but a person that I do look up to and am inspired by is Martin Luther King. I remember being in Atlanta on a layover, and there was a suit of his on display. And I stood next to that suit, and I felt this energy that I had never felt before. It was bizarre. And so when I think of King, I think of a leader who sacrificed against all odds to change society so that all of us could live better, so that this Jim Crow foolishness, this racist foolishness would come to an end so that we could all live as brothers and sisters without this stratification based on skin color.
Thank you. Ken?
I've had a philosophy through high school and beyond that I haven't met my best friend yet. Think about that for a second. Because every time I meet somebody, that person could potentially be my best friend, or maybe another best friend. And I know a lot of people. If I look up to a man, I look up to Edwin Lewis Cole. He said, love is a desire to benefit others, even at the expense of self, because love desires to give. Lust is the desire to benefit self, even at the expense of others, because lust desires to get. These people up here on this panel, they are here to serve you. They want to put their lives down for you to do something for you. That's a lot of love, folks.
Thank you. And now we're going to move to our closing statements. And Rob, we're going to start with you. So you have 3 minutes.
We've covered an awful lot of ground, asked a lot of questions, had an opportunity to look at stances and perspectives. And rather than taking away what my stance or my perspective on any particular issue is, I'd like to leave you with the idea that what matters is character. I said at the beginning that I live by 3 kind of principles. The first, yes, we can. I really, truly believe that we as Americans can. There is nothing we cannot do. Our kindergarten teachers told us that. I told several people today. I had a young lady in surgery helping me, and I told her, you want to go to vet school, you need to get it together because you can do it. You can. Yes, we can. Second, it may not look like we expect. Fixing our national debt is probably going to take losing some things that we hold dear, losing some money, giving some taxes, losing some programs. But in the end, that's okay because it's not about me. I believe that we need to treat each other with dignity, respect. We need to find opportunities for each other. We need to get education. And we also need to take personal responsibility for the things that we can do, that we should do, that we need to work at paying it forward.
Thank you. Greg?
I want to repeat this. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state shall shield the people from the political, economic, and military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is a mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. I've had the misfortune to be in a lot of media, and it's because I address these issues, because I see through the lies, and I don't repeat the lies. And so when it's time for you to vote, I want you to close your eyes and seriously think about the person you want to represent this district. No one has brought the media attention that I brought to this district. Nobody. And I'm not saying that bragging. I'm saying that America is sick and tired of the status quo. And so when it's time to vote, look in the mirror because the world is watching you. What happens in this district, the world is watching. Like I said, I've been in every media you can think of, and they're watching. When I was in New York, they're watching. LA, they're watching. And so think about who you want that has the guts. No one has stood up to Trump like I did. And so think about someone in DC that will have the wherewithal to stand for you. Because the true battle is not between the Democrats and the Republicans. It's not between the liberals and the conservatives. The true battle is between the filthy rich and the rest of us. I will represent the rest of us.
Thank you. Ken?
Thanks, folks. This has been fun. I've enjoyed this, and you've been great. You sat there, and nobody's squirming yet. And thanks for the panel to come out and take their time. I'm going to have a blast here in the next couple of years, folks. Come on, let's get real. you know that the new guy isn't going to stand a chance, right? We all know that, okay? But look, disasters are going to come again and again and again. Now, I hope that we don't have another car fire or another campfire in the next couple of years, or we have tornadoes, or hurricanes, or tsunamis, or mudslides, or sleet, or whatever it is that is going to be a problem. The building industry built it. The building industry will build it again. The question I have for the building industry is, how come instead of final responders, we're not first educators? And that's the plan that I have. You've heard a lot of talk tonight, folks, a lot of talk. I'm not talking, I'm talking about doing something. I have a plan to go to Congress and actually do something. Do something that benefits all Americans, and it makes every homeowner a stakeholder in this program. It gives every constituent a place to talk, and it gives every official a place to have their town hall meeting without getting on a plane, getting in a convention center, go rent a room someplace. They just got to roll out of bed, get on the phone, and call into any radio station for their constituents and talk to them. We can do any of these issues and more on Construction Talk Radio. Now go to talkradiobuilder.com. Just go to a National Disaster Awareness Program. Just put it in your search bar. You're going to find me. I am the originator of this idea. Nobody has it but me. You're going to find SEO crawling out of the internet. And it's going to be fun for you the next couple of years, because I get to be under these guys' skin for the next 2 years with something that will actually work. Okay? Under the skin, subcutaneous for you medical people out there. And Mr. LaMalfa, maybe he'll get a clue on why he should have contacted me like 8 years ago, because we could have mitigated that car fire. That was one fire that did not have to happen. And I can say that as a past president of the Shasta County Fire Safety Council. I know some things about it. So I want to thank you all for coming. And if you can help me out, get on social media and tell all your friends, hey, I want to just put a little chink in the armor of these other people out here and let them know Ken's out there and he has a real plan. And he has intentions to do something with it, and he's not going anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Audrey?
Friends, it is far past time that we replace our partisan career politician with a true public servant. And I am that public servant. But this election is not about me. This election is about every single one of us showing up as public servants and trying to do our part to heal our broken democracy. Friends, we show up as public servants when we work every day with our gifts and our skills to try to make our communities better. And we show up as true public servants when we look at our neighbors as Americans first, rather than as Republicans and Democrats. You deserve a representative who sees you, who cares about you, and who will work for you. And I can't do it alone. I need every single person to help me knock doors and make calls and write postcards and text and talk to your neighbors and, yes, donate, right, to have a successful political campaign. And from the woman who sends me $3 every month in cash from Susanville to people who generously maxed out to my campaign, you all are the heart and soul of what allows us to do this work, and we can't do it without you. And at this time of historic brokenness and division and corruption in our country, it's our job. It's all of our jobs to show up as public servants. Our March 3rd election, yeah, that's important. Our November 3rd election, yeah, that's important. But we have to do more. Dr. Martin Luther King, also one of my heroes, left us with the words, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? So I leave you that tonight. What are you doing for others? What are we doing for others? Today, tomorrow, and every day, what are we doing to heal our families, our communities, and our country? It is the privilege of my life to serve alongside you as your congressional candidate and your future Congresswoman. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give these folks a